getting ready for the keynotes and so forth, and haven't even had a chance to attend any sessions. So hopefully the sessions have been beneficial today. I know we're at the end of a long day of different talks, and so I want to make sure that we keep with the agenda and keep right at the 1 hour time frame. So what I'll ask you to do for this session is just hold some of the questions till the end. I'm happy to hang out afterwards, answer whatever questions you want, have some informal chats and so forth, but I ask you for this session to hold some of the questions till the end. This session is session 851, What's New in Windows Azure. My name is James Conard. For those of you that don't know me, I basically lead the technical evangelism team at Microsoft that's responsible for the Windows Azure platform. What that means is essentially there's a bunch of people that have a title of technical evangelist that are responsible for doing a bunch of different things in the community. Things like being on the Channel 9 show, delivering a lot of presentations, building various samples and demos, and other kinds of learning content you may see out there on the web. And so that's what my background represents. In this session, in the next hour, what we wanted to do is kind of give you an update on some of the things that have been happening within the Windows Azure platform. Now, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you in this room are using Windows Azure today? The vast majority of you. Great. How many are not? Okay, just getting started? Okay, great. Great. So this session, we will kind of focus on some of the changes that have happened over the last few months with the platform. But just to kind of do a quick level set, I thought I'd just have a quick slide here where we can talk about what is a Windows Azure platform, in particular, what are some of the core services. There are really 3 core services that you need to know about if you're getting started with the platform. The first one is essentially compute, the ability to go run your code within Microsoft's data centers. That code being service endpoints, REST-based services you might build, websites you might build, or even back-end kind of big compute, big data style applications. What Windows Azure enables is the ability to go run .NET-based code, as you saw earlier in the keynotes. You've probably seen some other sessions, but also code that may be written in other languages, PHP, Ruby, Python, and so forth. One of the key things with Windows Azure, as many of you, I'm sure, have experienced based on the show of hands, is just the ability to have more automated service management. So where you don't have to think about the idea of actually going and provisioning racks of machines, actually going and acquiring hardware, setting up relationships with multiple hosting providers to get a worldwide kind of footprint. Instead, having a platform service offering where you can deploy your code and capabilities like updating the underlying operating system are managed for you. That's essentially compute in a 1-minute kind of window. The other key service is storage. And what storage is designed to do is provide a really scalable and highly available storage service in the cloud. A service you can access through REST-based endpoints and store a variety of forms of data. Blob data, you store some non-structured table data, such as entities out in blob storage, as well as access queues and be able to exchange messages across the Windows Azure instances you may be running. This, again, is exposed to REST-based APIs, so it makes it really easy to consume these from a variety of different clients. And the third core service that you really need to understand is the database service. I imagine many of you, even if you're not using Windows Azure in the room today, are familiar with relational databases out there, be it SQL Server or MySQL. You can think of what we have in the Windows Azure platform, what we refer to the SQL Azure database, as a fully relational database in the cloud. It uses some of the same tools, as you'll see me demonstrate a little bit later, some of the same programming technologies that you can use to access a SQL Azure database. So those are some of the core services that you really need to know and understand. And I suspect many of you in this room, based on the show of hands, are using these services on a pretty regular basis. So with that, what I wanted to do, again, in this session is take a look at the last few months and what's been released in really the last three-month kind of window. And before I jump into that, I actually kind of want to go back a little bit here and kind of look at the last overall year and give you kind of perspective on how fast we've been moving with this platform. What I find over and over when I talk to developers is there's often a key feature or a key service that you're really waiting on for your application, or could really enhance the way you're building applications in the cloud. And since Microsoft is on this very rapid pace of quickly releasing new features and services, it's very easy to miss some of those new things that have been coming out. If we go back to almost a year ago, we had some pretty big announcements and releases around the Windows Azure platform, released a version 1.3 of the SDK, and released several features I'm sure many of you are using today. Things like full IIS, things like the ability to remote desktop into an instance. We also introduced some new services in a CTP form, things like the Access Control Service v2, or things like the caching service. We were then on a pretty rapid pace over the last year and continue to enhance not only those services, but also the way they were exposed out to developers, expanding some of the different offers for which you can use to go sign up for the platform, and even expanding the underlying infrastructure that we have at the CDN. As I kind of build this out, you can see we're just on a pace of quickly introducing some of those new services and taking those services from a CTP mode into a general availability mode as well. And so that kind of brings us up to where we're at today. And what I want to do is actually take a view of the last 3 months. And the way I kind of look at the different features and enhancements that have come out from the platform the last 3 months, they kind of fall in 3 major categories where we've invested some of our engineering resources. One of the key areas is around just making it easier to build applications. You saw some of that in the keynote. I'll show you some of that and a little bit more today in this session as we walk through Visual Studio and just show you some of the enhancements that are provided with the new Windows Azure SDK and tools that were just released. We also have a number of manageability enhancements, just how you go and actually manage the access to the platform, how you go manage some of those core services and interact with them, either from a portal experience or programmatically as well. It's very interesting in this space. I've actually been working in the Windows Azure platform space for about 4 years now. For those of you who've actually used Windows Azure, you may know that that actually predates when we announced and released some of the platform technologies. And what was interesting when we started first introducing some of these services out to developers, we consistently found that a lot of developers were not only playing the role of a traditional developer writing code, but also kind of playing a DevOps kind of role, where you're often interacting with back-end systems and doing some management operations yourself. And what you'll see in the manageability enhancements, there's a lot of ways you can tap into those as a developer and access the Windows Azure platform. And then finally, I want to show you some of the new enhanced services that we're starting to introduce. We're going to continue to take those core services that you just saw and add more and more features and functionality to them that are based on feedback from many of you in this room, but are also based on some of the different opportunities we see to continue to make it easier to use the platform. But we're also going to continue to introduce new services as well. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the different development enhancements. So as of today, we actually announced during the keynote today the September 2011 Visual Studio Tools release. And this Visual Studio Tools release combines a few things we just released a couple weeks ago as an incremental update, but also added a few additional features for Visual Studio 2010. And if you take a look at some of these features, a lot of them are really designed to address some areas where we've gotten feedback from, I imagine, several of you in this room, where you've been building applications in Windows Azure and just running into areas where you wanted a few enhancements. You wanted the workflow as a developer to be much smoother. One of the key things we introduced here was the ASP.NET MVC3 template. So you can very easily go File, New Project, and select MVC3 as that project template and get started very quickly building the MVC application to the cloud. Another key thing that we introduced was the ability to do profiling out in the cloud. So taking the Visual Studio Profiler and leveraging that with Windows Azure instances. So to make it easier to debug and understand what is actually going on inside of instances, where you may have some code that you're trying to isolate and debug and find the root issue you're trying to resolve. Another key area is around multiple cloud configurations. A lot of times when we've been talking to developers who have been using the platform, and even internally as we build our own applications, we find the need to go and represent different types of configurations. Go and have multiple testing or staging environments and take advantage of the fact that we have that elastic capability of provisioning more Windows Azure compute instances, databases, and storage accounts. And so that really introduces the need to be able to better manage all that configuration information. Validation support. One of the most common issues that we've seen over the forums over the last year was just the issues around not including some of the necessary assemblies within application. How many people have run into that where you've deployed out a service package and you've missed a few assemblies? A few of you in this room? So that's one of the key areas what we wanted to address within the tools release as well. And then just overall improving the way you build the cloud service projects and the way you package up and deploy those. What we're also introducing today is the Windows Azure SDK 1.5. And this is really an incremental update to the SDK that introduces a couple new features in the way of a couple utilities that you can use to configure remote desktop connections, more specifically, to upload a certificate that you use from remote desktop on the command line, and also to configure the passwords that you'd use for remote desktop. So some of the new utilities are included. But fundamentally, it actually addresses a lot of the core performance issues and overall improves the experience of using the developer emulator on Windows Azure. And so what I want to do now is, instead of talking about some of these features, I just want to flip over to a machine here and start showing you the new Windows Azure SDK 1.5 and Visual Studio Tools. So let me flip over here to my demo machine. And that would not be it. Let me flip over here to my laptop. That would be much better. So what I'm going to do here is actually just go ahead and start up a new instance of Visual Studio. And I'll be running Visual Studio 2010 here. And inside of this new instance of Visual Studio, I'm just going to create a file new project. And so, of course, we see the Windows Azure project, as many of you are familiar with in this room. And I'll just go ahead and hit OK. One of the things you'll notice here is that we're introducing ASP.NET MVC3 as a template. So I can very easily select that project template. And by doing so, I not only get a web project that's an MVC3 project, and my cloud service projects are associated together, but also all of the necessary assemblies that are required for MVC are included as well and specified as copy local. So we're not going to have to deal with trying to trace down which MVC assemblies or components we would need to deploy to Windows Azure. We can include them as part of our solution. You'll also notice if you install the new ASP.NET MVC4 preview release, which we also announced today, that you'll see MVC4 light up here as a web role project template as well. And so what I'll do for this demo is I'll just go ahead and select that MVC4 web role and go ahead and get started. Here you can see the new ASP.NET MVC4 project dialog with some of the new templates that are exposed by MVC4. And so I can get started with the Internet Application Template, like what you saw Scott demonstrate earlier today. Or in this case, I'll go ahead and start with the Mobile Application Template. I'll just go ahead and hit OK here. And what I'll get is an ASP.NET MVC project here that is using the new jQuery mobile support that we're including with MVC. What you also see is I get my cloud service project, and I get a couple different configuration files here. One for the cloud and one for local. Now, I can, of course, create my own. Now, what I want to show you is that I actually don't have the developer emulator running on my local machine. So let me go ahead and just start up my project. And what you'll notice as we do the compilation and the startup is that we're now starting to introduce, looks like it's cut off a little bit there. Now starting to introduce a new dialog you'll see, show a little more insight into what's happening as we start up the emulator for the first time. And then we'll actually start up our web application. So let me go ahead and resize that for the projector. It looks like it's cutting off a little bit. So here's the new MVC4 project template for jQuery mobile app. And like what you saw Scott demonstrate earlier today, I can easily navigate through some of the pages and get either a desktop or a mobile view. So this is an application I can very easily access from a variety of different mobile devices. And of course, in this case, it's running inside of the dev emulator for Windows Azure. Let me go ahead and just stop that. And now what I'll do is I'll just start it up again. And what you'll see here, once we have the dev emulator started up, the performance and startup time on the emulator is much, much faster with the new SDK tools. Anybody like that feature? So just addressing, based on a lot of feedback, the overall performance and enhancing the developer lifecycle. So you can very easily make some of the code changes, F5, and get some of those changes running within your local environment. So that in itself, in my opinion, is reason enough to go grab the latest SDK as fast as you can. So here's my new project. And instead of continuing on this, what I want to do is I'll just switch over here to a project that I've created earlier for a simple photo viewing site. And so this is a photo viewing site. We call it Fluffy Photos that we've actually built out over the number of years. It's used as the Windows Azure platform behind the scenes. More specifically, it uses compute and it uses blob, table, and queue storage as part of Windows Azure storage. And so if I just go ahead and open up a browser instance here, I'll show you what this simple little photo viewing app looks like. I'll start a photo browsing, or I'll start an instance here of my Fluffy Photos app, and I'll just browse out to it at cloudapp.net. And so it's a very simple photo site. I can upload photos, I can zoom in on photos, and I can see some thumbnails as well that are generated as part of this Windows Azure project. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to just drop back into VS, and I want to show you that its ability to have multiple configuration files. So in a project like this, where you are using various storage accounts, you're often probably using one for diagnostics in a development environment. You may be using one for diagnostics in a testing environment. You may want to isolate some of your data if you're in a team development capacity, and you just want to isolate some of your data for your own use. And so that's why we introduced the support for multiple cloud configuration files. So what I can do here is just go ahead and drill in on the roles. And more specifically, I'll drill in here on the web role. And you'll notice here that we have support for multiple cloud configurations. I have the cloud and the local configuration by default. And if I go into manage, I can take a copy of my cloud configuration file, go ahead and modify that, and just go ahead and rename it to something like test, for example. And then throughout the dialogues you'll see inside of Visual Studio is we've provided support for the configuration files. So if I switch over to test here, I can modify my instances for just test. And so what we're doing behind the scenes there is modifying the cloud service configuration. And that's why you see things that are in the service definition that have been grayed out through the dialogues. Of course, I can go through local storage as well, or some of my endpoints, and configure those just for that configuration file. So that's one of the new enhancements we introduced. The other thing is just the improved deployment experience. So let me go ahead and select the option here to go ahead and publish this solution. And you'll notice here we have the new publish dialog. So with the new publish dialog, we've tried to simplify the overall experience so that you don't get into a situation where you have 3 windows that are layered on top of each other. Make it a little bit easier to bring that information right to you within Visual Studio there. And what you'll see as part of this is that we've also introduced the profiling support. So with profiling support, we can turn on several different levels of profiling, ranging from the CPU sampling to concurrency-based profiling, and actually allows us to go inside of instances and have the profiler running. This is certainly something that you would only want to do in a development capacity, but allows you to get a little bit more insight into some of those running instances. Let me go ahead and just, instead of deploying this out, let me go ahead and just browse out to our app. And what I want to do is upload a photo here. I'll just go ahead and sign into the application. And I just want to kick off some work so we can see some of the profiler in action here. So let me try to remember my password. And that's not it. Let me go ahead and register again. Yeah, I'll close that. Go ahead and log in here. And I'll just name my album James Con to register. Okay. And what I'll do is just go ahead and create a new album. I'll create one called My Picks. Go and upload a photo here. Just browse to my local machine, and I'll just pick a quick photo here to the Windows Azure background. Go ahead and just call this Windows Azure background. And as I do that, what we're actually doing as part of this application is submitting that file up to our Windows Azure applications running in compute. And then we're stuffing that into Windows Azure blob storage. And we'll see how we can take a look at some of this data as we move through the demos today. And so as we actually put that in blob storage, behind the scenes we have a worker role. Think of it, for those of you not really familiar or have spent a lot of time with Windows Azure, think of it as a way of really just running kind of background work and logic. We're pulling out that photo out of blob storage, and we're converting that photo into a thumbnail-based view. So let me go ahead and just refresh here. And what we should see here is, it looks like the thumbnail hasn't been generated yet, but the image coming back here. And so what I want to do now is, since I've kicked off some of the work inside of Windows Azure, is I want to actually drop back into VS and go over to Server Explorer. Inside of Server Explorer on Windows Azure Compute, we can now go ahead and add our deployment environment. I'll expand my build demo here as one of my subscriptions. I'm registered within Windows Azure. And I will actually go down to Fluffy Photos Demo and select production as the environment. And as I do that, what you'll notice here is I can actually select View Profiling Report. Because I turned on tracing support when I deployed out this application, we can now go into Server Explorer and pull down some of that profiling information. What that essentially does is it sends a message out to an instance that kicks off that profile report, and it stuffs it into storage so we can pull it down locally. For the sake of time here, what I've done is I've actually saved off a profile report. And so let me go ahead and just open up that profile report here. Okay. And so here you can see inside the profiling report, we can get some detailed information about what is actually happening within our worker role. So we can drill in here on worker role run, take a look at the execution for this, and see where we're spending some of our CPU time. It looks like we're spending some of that on the create thumbnail as part of the process. So it gives us an ability to go debug and kind of isolate some of the issues and drill down and to take a look at some of that code. So that's some of the new tool enhancements that we've introduced with the new Windows Azure SDK and Tools 1.5. I would definitely recommend going and taking a look at it and grabbing those bits so you can get started using that. So let me flip back over to the presentation, and we'll talk about some of the other enhancements we're delivering. So I want to spend a fair amount of time on the area of manageability. And based on the number of hands in here, and a lot of you using Windows Azure today, I imagine you spend a lot of time in the Windows Azure Platform Portal. So I want to talk about some of the things that we've been doing to make it easier to get access to some of those services, especially in a more programmatic way. So what we've done on the service management side over the last few months is we've continued to expose more and more of the functionality that you see in the portal through the REST-based Service Management API. For those of you that are getting started with Windows Azure, the Service Management API essentially allows us to go do things like go and get access to information about our storage accounts, go and even do deployments of our applications, our service packages that we may create with our code and our other assets, do some of that programmatically. It really gives us the opportunity to go build some of our own tools, our own scripts, and automate a number of different things, especially as part of a development lifecycle. With the Service Management API over the last few months, we've introduced the ability to go and create hosted services as well as go and create storage accounts. And this has been one of the key things that a lot of people have asked for, especially as you're thinking about scripting deployments within your development environment. Another key thing that we're introducing today is more detailed status information for running instances. So you may notice in the portal as you deploy an application out into Windows Azure, there are a lot of different states it goes through, 15 to be exact. We're exposing all of those different instance states now directly through the APIs. So again, you can get more insight into what is happening for your compute instances. This may not sound like a big deal for some of you. Some of you that are maybe running some websites that are only consuming a few instances. But as we start seeing more and more people using Windows Azure to run more complex workloads, applications across multiple data centers, applications that are consisting of hundreds or even thousands of instances, this is a key ability to build some of their own scripts and their own management tools and get that insight. The ability to also do rollback is another key area. And so as you go into the portal experience today and change a configuration file or perform an upgrade of an existing application, sometimes you may actually want to cancel that operation before those changes are fully take effect. And so we've introduced the ability to now perform a rollback through the APIs. And then finally, exposing some of the subscription and quota information as well. So you can get information about the number of available hosted services you can create, the number of instances that you may be able to consume from Windows Azure Compute instances, and even the number of storage accounts as well. And so all that information is also exposed through the Service Management API. And so what I want to do here is just flip over to another demo machine. And on this demo machine, what I have is a pretty simple application here. Let me go ahead and log back in here. Good, it looks a little bit better there. And what I have here is a pretty simple application that we've developed against the management APIs that are exposed by Windows Azure, against the service management APIs. And so what I'll do here is just go ahead and run this application and show you what this looks like. And so this is a simple Windows app. And this application exposes information like our subscription information. It gives us a list of the hosted services that are deployed for our subscription or configured for our subscription. And it also gives us a list of the storage accounts that have been created for our subscription. And so I can go ahead and drill in here to the Fluffy Photos application as an example. Take a look at the production deployment, see all the configuration information, the information that we provided to Windows Azure when we started up this application. And I can even go ahead and drill down in and take a look at the instance status information as well. And so a pretty simple application. One of the things we've done with this app is showed how we can go take advantage of the ability to go create hosted services and storage accounts. And so what I'll do to show you that here is I'll just put the application on one side of the screen, and I'll just go ahead and pull up the Windows Azure Platform portal on the other side. Let me go ahead and go to hosted services, and as I do that, I'll drill into my subscriptions. So you see the portal experience that many of you know and love today on the right, and I'll just drill into my hosted services there. Expand this out so you can get a little bit more of a detailed view. Great. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is actually just select my, my subscription there. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to use the APIs to go create a new hosted service. So let's create a new hosted service. Let's call it something like Fluffy Photos. We'll call it 4, I guess, this is my next one. And I'll go ahead and just create that. And what we're actually doing here behind the scenes, we're just making a simple REST call where we're sending some information out to the service management APIs to create that new hosted service. On the right-hand side, you see that the portal experience, of course, has an automatic refresh that's built in. And so after that call is made and it's been processed, if I scroll down here during the refresh, what we should actually see is that new hosted service that's been added there and displayed right down below. And so just a simple example of how we can go use some of these different various APIs. I can, of course, do the same thing with storage here as part of this application, and I can also go and even do new deployments. And so what I also want to show here is the ability to go and get some of that more detailed information. So if I go ahead and select up in the top left side here, what you can see now is that we're exposing out some of the subscription information, more specifically the quota information, through those REST-based APIs as well. So I can find out how many cores I have access to, how many hosted services, how many storage accounts I could potentially go and get access to. I know that's one of the key things that looking at the forums and in a lot of discussions with developers that you guys have been looking forward to getting access to. What I'll do now is I'll just go ahead and select my Fluffy Photos 4 here, and let me just go ahead and do a new deployment. And in this case, I'll select Fluffy Photos 4 again. I'll do a deployment for 1.0, and I'll just browse to a service package that I have here on my local machine. So I'm just going to take my application and send a service package, and I'm going to send that out through to Windows Azure through service management APIs, and go ahead and start a new deployment. I'll select the configuration file information here and hit OK. And so it'll take a few seconds for this to take effect here for the Fluffy Photos 4 app. But what you'll see down below is that we're starting to get some of the more detailed status information. So we can get insight into what is actually happening during this deployment process. And so that's, again, another nice thing if you're scripting out some of these deployments or you're managing a large environment. It's a nice thing to get access to. What you'll also see is if we let this deployment continue to run on, is that we could even perform rollbacks. If this is a case of we're doing an upgrade or we were actually changing some of the configuration, we could roll back to our previous state as well. So it's a simple application. Let me go ahead and drop in here to VS, and I'll show you some of the code for how we're accessing those service management APIs. So here I have some of the code where we're actually just getting hosted services as an example. And you'll notice here I'm actually running this app here using the .NET Framework 4.5 and using some of the new async capability that we've introduced. What we're simply doing is just calling out service management APIs and saying we want to go and grab all the hosted services and providing the specific hosted service name. And all these APIs are REST-based using standard HTTP verbs and pretty easy to get access to. The main thing, if you haven't used Windows Azure and you start wanting to explore some of these service management APIs, is you need to set up that certificate relationship so you can actually pass in a client certificate on all these HTTP calls. So it's a simple example of some of the new APIs that are exposed. So what else could you do with these besides build your own kind of clone of the portal experience? Well, one thing is actually go and run things like PowerShell commandlets on top of them. And so what I have over here is actually a simple PowerShell script where we've pulled together overall the Windows Azure PowerShell commandlets that are out there on CodePlex. And we can actually perform a lot of different automated tasks. Like, for example, getting hosted services, and then if we don't have a hosted service out there, creating a new hosted service. Performing logic for going and getting a storage account and creating a new storage account. And overall, just automating an entire deployment process. And so this is just a quick example of how you could stitch some of these things together and make it easier to manage your applications, whether in production capacity or whether you're doing some active development in the Windows Azure platform. So what I'll do now is just flip back over my PowerPoint box and talk about some of the other enhancements. So one of the things we introduced probably about 2 months ago was Windows Azure Storage Analytics. And Storage Analytics essentially allows you to get information about how your storage account is being used. That information can consist of logs, so getting access to comma separated values, formatted logs, where you can understand what kinds of requests and actions have been performed against your storage account, as well as the ability to go get metric information, so understanding some of the key statistics for blobs, tables, and queues. The overall storage analytics is configured by, again, calling a REST-based service and specifying some of the retention policies. How long do you want that data stored? What types of data do you want to log? Whether you want to just, for example, blob data, or you want table and queue information as well. As well as you can call out to a REST-based service to get some of that metric information. So what I want to do here is actually just show you a quick example of how this could be used. So let me flip over here to my laptop environment. Okay. And I'll just go ahead and close this instance here. Okay. And let me go ahead and flip over to another solution I have here, which is a simple storage analytics application. And so what I have here is a little ASP.NET MVC application, again, where we're writing some code against those storage analytics APIs. And one of the key things that we first want to do when we use these analytics APIs is we need to turn on analytics support. So if I go ahead and take a look at some of this code, you'll notice that we can just perform a simple gets and puts to go and actually set how we want to store some of the analytic information out in Windows Azure for our storage account. So here you can see a method for getting our service properties, and I can do the equivalent for setting some of the service properties. What I'm going to do now is actually go and run this solution. So I'll just browse out to an application here and open that up in Windows Azure. So here's our storage analytics sample application. And what this sample app does is it kind of exposes to me all the various settings I can go configure for table, queue, and blob based storage. So you can see here from the sample app that I can go turn on logging for table, queue, and blob, for read, write, delete operations, and I can also specify retention policy. For my Fluffy Photos sample application here that I'm actually accessing, that storage account, I'm actually configured all of these various settings and turned it on for a 30-day window. And so what that means is that Fluffy Photos app, as I'm actually running the application and it's using blob storage, table storage, and queue storage, is that, for one, it's actually using logging behind the scenes. So let me go ahead and just show you what some of those logs look like behind the scenes. To do that, I'll actually just launch a storage application here. There's a bunch of them out there on the market. One of my favorites is the Cloudberry solution. And inside of Cloudberry, what I can actually do is I'll navigate over to my storage account. And just to show you what this looks like, actually, let me select the other one here. Let me select Fluffy Demo. And I'll just go ahead and go to logs. And you'll see that when we turn on logging for a storage account, what we essentially get is a hidden container, that's $logs, that we can then navigate through the directories of blob, queue, and table, depending on what type of storage we wanted to configure. And then we can drill into some of the folders that are created by the storage analytics system. So in this case, since I have storage analytics turned on, and I have it turned on for blob storage, I can drill down into the folder that's created by storage analytics. So you can see here it actually creates a directory structure that's based on year, month, day, and then by hour. And I can open up one of the CSV files that's being generated. So the advantage here is that we're actually just using Windows Azure Storage to capture all the storage analytics information. That means it's very easy to go access, just like you would store any other data out in Windows Azure Storage. This case is a CSV file, so one of the things that is your responsibility is to go write some of that code to pull in those CSV files, parse it, and work with it as well. And that's what we've done in this little sample application. So let me go and navigate over here in the sample app, and you'll see that I'm just pulling in some of that blob information, some of the log information out of blob storage. I'll pull it in for my usage of blob storage, and I'll get the data for the last 2 hours. And here you can see some of that data as it's parsed. And we can see the individual transaction operations. In this case, it was a get blob, what the HTTP status code was, and what specific object was being accessed within blob storage. So that's how the log system works. And of course, I can go do the same thing for queues and for tables as well. Let me go over to metrics here. And under metrics, what I want to show you is how we can get access to some of the information around capacity and overall transactions. So a key thing with storage analytics is I can now see information such as, in the case of blobs, how many containers I have, how many objects, and overall how much usage I'm using within Windows Azure Storage for that type of object. I can also see the types of operations that are being performed and the overall number of requests. So for instance, if I change this over to queues, then you can see the number of get message operations, the list queues, and other operations I'm performing against the storage system. So one of the key things, I know many of you have been looking to get more insight into how you're using storage. This is a new feature that's now enabled through Windows Azure Storage now. So let me go ahead and flip back over to my PowerPoint presentation. So we've talked about Windows Azure Compute in terms of manageability and some of the enhancements there around service management. Talked about Windows Azure Storage. What about SQL Azure? Well, likewise with SQL Azure, there's a number of things we've been adding into the platform. One of the key capabilities that we just turned on last week was import-export. How many people in this room have had a chance to use import-export? Nobody yet, because you're coming to build, right? So import-export actually allows you to go take an entire database, and that database being inside of SQL Azure or a database that's on premises in SQL Server or SQL Express. Take that database data, schema information, and actually go and export it as what we refer to as a backpack file. So a single file that contains all that information. That data, schema, and data can then be imported into SQL Azure or into a local SQL Server environment if you're using some of the new Denali framework components locally. And so what that really provides is a nice, easy way for moving data and schema information, especially as many of you in this room are working at development capacity and you need to move from your local environment out to the cloud. One of the things we introduced is support for multiple servers and subscriptions a couple months ago. So you can very easily now from the portal go and add additional servers that you would use. And those servers can be assigned to different data centers. So as more and more people start looking at building applications that are distributed, maybe running in different data centers around the world, having that ability from the portal is absolutely key. We've exposed some of the service management APIs now, where just like we saw in Windows Azure, we can start accessing the SQL Azure service and configuring things like the servers, adding and removing the SQL Azure servers. Going and doing things like configuring firewall rules, things that you see in the portal experience, and doing that programmatically. We've introduced the support for what we refer to as full DAC 1.1 support. Basically allows you to go and do upgrades of just the database schema if you don't want to include the data as well. And added co-admin support within the portal experience. So we can now go and assign other individuals on a subscription, allow them to go in and manage and configure your SQL Azure servers and databases from the Windows Azure Platform Portal. So there's some of the key database enhancements we've introduced. What I want to do is just show you one of those key features, in particular the import-export capability that we just introduced. So let me flip over to my laptop environment here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to navigate out to the portal. And so here I'm, of course, in the SQL Azure section of the Windows of the portal. And you can see here on the left-hand side, of course, I have my database server, and I have a few different databases. What you may not have noticed, we just released this last week, is the import-export capability exposed through the portal. So I can now go, for example, and just select import and import in a backpack file. So let me go and show you how it actually go get that backpack file from a local environment and then go and import it out into my SQL Azure environment in the cloud. Here on my local machine, I'm actually have a SQL Express environment running. Let me go ahead and just connect out to it here. I'll just use Windows authentication. And on my local environment, I have a simple database. It's called My2Do, a simple task management database. So I have tasks and categories and that type of thing. If you've ever gone through any of the hands-on labs or the other samples out there, you're probably even familiar with the My2Do application. So My2Do has a number of different tables here, and some data as well. And what I want to do is actually export this out. Now, to do that, what I've installed on my machine is some of the new Denali components, the new SQL Server Denali components. Denali is the next version of Microsoft SQL Server. It's actually in a CTP form today. The CTP 3 was just released in July. And what those components do is in a local environment, SQL Server or SQL Express, allow me to get that backpack file. Let me go ahead and flip over here to my directory. And what you'll see here is I actually have a couple scripts in a command line tool that I'm going to use for exporting my data out to a local backpack. So this isn't quite integrated within the Management Studio tool yet. So that's why I'm going to show it here from a command line tool. So what you'll see here is I'm actually just going to run a simple command line tool against SQL Express. I'm going to point to get my My2Do database, and I'm going to export that out as an individual backpack file. So let me go ahead and just double-click on Run this. And you'll see that what we're doing locally is we're extracting out the database and schema information, and we'll get that in a single file. It usually takes a couple minutes for all that information to be exported. What I also have here on my machine here, looks like that one's already done here. Or nope, almost. So what I also have on my machine here is I have a version I grabbed earlier. So I'll take this My2Do backpack, and I'll now go and import it in to SQL Azure. Now, to import that into SQL Azure, I need to first go put it into storage. And so we use Windows Azure Storage as a place to capture all of these backpack files. So again, I'll flip over to my favorite storage utility, or I could even do this programmatically if I wanted to. And I'll go into another storage account. I have a backpacks here. And I'll delete the existing backpack file that I have out in my storage account. You can see I have this My2Do backpack that I exported earlier. I'll just go ahead and copy that over. So I'm going to upload that out to Windows Azure Storage now. And now what I'll do is I'll actually just right-click on this and go into Properties. I'll just get the path to it. Okay. So now I got the backpack. It's out in Windows Azure Storage. I can now import it into my SQL Azure environment. Let me go ahead and go back out to the portal. Okay. And you'll notice I have my target server here. Let me go ahead and log in. Specify my database name. Let's call this My2Do. I think database number 2 is available. Let's go ahead and just call it that. We're using a web edition. I'll just go ahead and paste in here the URL to that backpack file that I've already uploaded out to storage. And then I'll provide an access key. So to cheat a little bit here, I have a little notepad file. I'll just grab my access key information. Nobody access my storage account right now, please. So here I'll go ahead and just point to this backpack file, and I'll provide my access key, and just go ahead and hit finish. And so what we're doing now is we get back a confirmation window. And what's happening right now is that we've actually, through the portal, reached out to a new service that's being exposed on the back end by SQL Azure. It's a new REST-based service. And what that service is doing is it's pulling in that backpack file, and it's actually going and creating the MyToDo 2 database for me, and it's importing in that backpack, including all the schema information and all the table information. I can go through the portal and get some status information, or again, I just run it from a command line utility and even interact with that service. So I'll just hit get status here, and it looks like the import here that we just started a few minutes ago is actually complete. So let me go out to our portal here, and I'll just do a quick refresh. And there's my MyToDo 2 database. So it contains my data as well as my schema information. And so a few steps to go through of actually getting your data from a local SQL server environment and exporting that out and importing into SQL Azure. But what's really interesting is that we can also go from a SQL Azure environment straight into blob storage. So you can see the export button there. And so export, as you can imagine, basically just allows me to go and take that entire database that exists in SQL Azure, export the schema and data to another backpack file. So I'll go ahead and log in again here. And in this case, I'll go ahead and provide a blob URL. Let me go ahead and cheat a little bit here. Pull up my storage client again here. And we go to my backpacks. And I will cheat a little bit here by copying that URL. So I'll copy that. In the portal, I'll paste it. And I'll actually call this MyToDo 2, the database that I exported. And we need to give the key here so that SQL Azure has access to the specific storage account that I'm using, and go ahead and hit finish. And so as we see that, we'll get the confirmation. I'll go back over to my storage client and do a refresh. And what you've noticed is we've actually exported out our entire database and schema information as well. So this is a way that you could actually take very quick snapshots of some of your data and schema, especially in a development environment or as you're doing iterative development. It can be a really useful feature. What's actually really nice here too is because of REST-based services, I could script that as part of an overall deployment, as part of overall development lifecycle that I may have in my environment. So pretty cool new capability that's being exposed now as part of SQL Azure. One other quick thing that I want to show you from a SQL Azure feature is the ability to go and access those SQL Azure servers. And so what I have here is a PowerShell script as well. Let me go ahead and open that up. In this PowerShell script, what I've actually done is I've using some commandlets here and going and creating new SQL Azure servers and firewall rules. I imagine many of you in this room have been bitten in the past by not configuring firewall rules properly and accessing SQL Azure from your local environment, especially if you've been working the platform for some time. And so this is quite handy, especially as you're building applications, to quickly change firewall rules from a PowerShell commandlet or from a REST-based service. And so what you'll see here is if I go ahead and just run this PowerShell script here. Oops, let me pull up a command line here. PowerShell. Run create server. Is what you'll notice here is I run that create server command, go back out to the portal and do a refresh. Is that we can actually just go and create those servers now programmatically as well and configure the firewall rules exactly what we want, how we want them. So just another feature that's been a common request that's now lit up as part of overall SQL Azure experience. So let me go ahead and flip back over to PowerPoint here. So we've talked a lot about manageability, and it's been a big area. We've heard a lot of requests from customers. Final area I want to talk about is where some of the new and enhanced services that we're starting to expose. So as I mentioned, we have some core services, and we're going to continue to go and provide more and more functionality on top of those services. One of the key things that we announced today is support for geo-replication. And with geo-replication, what we're now doing with Windows Azure is we are replicating blob and table data across multiple data centers. So your Windows Azure storage accounts where you have blob data, where you have table data, it could be photos like my simple application, or it could be some pretty mission critical data for the cloud apps that you're building, that is actually being replicated now by Windows Azure Storage. Being replicated within the same region, so the region being US, Europe, or Asia, but to a data center that's at least 100 miles away. And this is designed really for a disaster recovery situation. So a situation where there's a natural disaster, data centers completely wiped off the map, a situation where you need that data, and there's been an overall critical situation. And that's really one of the key values of the cloud. Asynchronous replication of some of the live requests. So overall, best way to explain asynchronous replication at critical path of live request is that when you're performing some live request, multiple operations against a storage environment, that information will be replicated in an asynchronous way for performance. The geo-replication is enabled by default for all storage accounts. If you want to disable it, then you can contact support and have it turned off for your storage account. And then to get access to that data in a situation where there is a kind of a disaster or that kind of situation, you also contact Microsoft support. Geo-replication is included as well in the price for storage. So we're not adjusting any of the prices for storage. We're just not charging anything additional for providing geo-replication for disaster recovery. So that's one of the key new features we enabled. We're also going to continue to expose new services that you can go and consume. I imagine many of you in this room have heard about some of those new services we've introduced over the last year. Services like the caching service, so you have a distributed in-memory cache. Services like the access control service, like you saw in the keynote today, where you can go and authenticate and log in against multiple identity providers. One of the services that we've also introduced as a CTP in this last year is the Service Bus messaging capability. And Service Bus messaging is now officially out of CTP, and it's enabled for building production applications. In fact, if you go into the Windows Azure Platform portal now, and you dig into the App Fabric section of the portal, you'll see that we're starting to expose some of the new capabilities that are provided by the Service Bus. We refer to this release as the September release, and it's officially live and in production today. One of the key things that we're delivering as part of the Service Bus release is support for queuing. And so oftentimes, if you've been using the Service Bus or you started exploring it, oftentimes the way Service Bus is used with applications is for doing distributed communication, especially through firewall or network boundaries, especially in hybrid application scenarios. And what we've heard from a lot of individuals as they build those applications is they want the ability to have persistent messages. They want the ability to have queue support as well. And so we're introducing reliable and durable storage for those messages with up to 1 gig per queue. We're also introducing is topic support. So topics, you can basically think of those as getting queue support, but also with pub/sub-based messaging. So we can easily distribute messages out to listeners based on a topic they may be subscribed to. And the best way to really understand how queues and topics work is to take a look at a quick demo. So let me go ahead and dive into a .NET-based demo here, and I'll show you how this works. Flip over my laptop here. And on my machine here, what I have is a simple app that I've created that's using the new Service Bus September release. And so this, again, ASP.NET MVC application. And I also have a simple console app where I can actually send messages from an ASP.NET MVC application and receive those from the console application. If I take a quick look here at the application here, I'll just go ahead and launch it in the browser. Or better yet, I'll run it from the emulator. So I'll start up my app. So this simple app basically is a jQuery mobile ASP.NET MVC 4 application, provides a list of different sessions, and I can just drill in on one of those sessions, like what's new in Windows Azure, and just leave a comment. So leave a comment, for example, nice session, and go ahead and submit that. And what this application is actually doing as we press the submit button, if we drop into some of the code, is we're communicating out with the Service Bus. More specifically, if we take a look at some of this code, what we're actually doing is we're getting a new messaging factory, and then we actually can go and create a new client to interact with the service bus. We'll then use this new type that's introduced by the service bus called a brokered message. And that brokered message allows us to capture not only the data we want to send, but also some metadata. And in this case, you can see that I'm passing my session ID as part of that brokered message. So it's part of that metadata. So session ID of 851, for example, is being passed in as a property. So this is a very simple application. It's actually an ASP.NET app that's just sending messages into the service bus every time some of those comments are being left. If I go over here on the right-hand side here, what I can do as well is start up this other console application I've created. Before I do that, let me go ahead and show you a little bit of the code. So this console app is actually just reads some of the configuration information for connecting out to the service bus. And then what you'll see here is that we're also using the message factory as the main object we interact with from a .NET app for communicating with the service bus. And then we'll go and create a new subscription client for a specific topic that we want to listen to. So in this case, we'll go and listen for the session code as a topic. As we receive in those messages, we'll just write them out to the console. So let me go ahead and right-click here on the application, and I'll start this console app here in debug mode. And I'm actually passing in 851, my session ID here, and you can see that I've already received the message that I submitted a few minutes ago from the web application. The reason why is because we also have queuing support. So remember, those messages are actually durable. So my web app can send them out to the service bus with a specific topic. They can be queued up and then delivered as the clients will come online. And so let me go ahead and just pull up that on the right-hand side. I'll go back into my application. You'll notice I'm passing in here as a parameter the session ID 851. I'm using that as my topic here. I'll just hit submit. And what you'll see is once we send that message out through the service bus is that we're receiving that message down from the console application. So a pretty quick, simple example demonstrating some of the APIs. What this really allows you to do is build some more distributed, rich applications that can really take advantage of some of the other service bus capabilities. Like, for example, the ability to go connect through network and firewall boundaries as well. But the pub sub support, we believe, is really going to be a rich feature that as you build these more distributed, scalable applications in the cloud, that a lot of people will start to take advantage of. So a simple little app. If you want to go ahead and try it out, you can actually just go out to an app that's running in Windows Azure right now. Same instance of the application, just jamescon.sbdemo.cloudapp.net. And again, I can go ahead and pick a session and enter in a comment here. I'll send nice session again and hit submit. And again, we're just sending those through the service bus here. So we'll see that message come through. So a very simple application that demonstrates some of the service bus capability. What I'll do here is I'll flip back over here to my PowerPoint presentation, and I'll point you to a few additional resources. One of the things we announced today as well is the marketplace support. If you haven't checked out the marketplace, I encourage you to go out to marketplace.windowsazure.com and take a look at it. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it today. What the marketplace is really designed to do is allow you to go list and find applications, so applications that are running on Windows Azure. Some of these applications can also be what we refer to as paid applications, where essentially if you're building a software as a service app, you can have it listed out in the marketplace, have Microsoft allow customers to come and purchase it, and Microsoft will then pay you for the usage of the application, effectively allowing you to go sell your applications out to customers. In order to go and participate in that provisioning, in that process as a paid application, what you need to do is implement a couple of different service endpoints. And if you check out the marketplace site, there's some great examples of how to go and implement those endpoints as part of your software as a service-based app. One of the things we've also spent a lot of time on the last few months is making sure that you can build a wide variety of application scenarios with the cloud. And one of the key things that keeps on coming up is device applications. Devices have often characteristics where on the back end, they can really benefit from cloud computing resources. They need the ability to quickly get access to content and data on a worldwide basis and actually scale up based on peak user demand. And so it's a classic match for using a Windows Azure-based environment. There's a number of toolkits out there from Microsoft that are designed to allow you to go use iOS, Android, and Windows Phone with Windows Azure. And what they do is they take advantage of some of these same services that you've seen today or you're using already. Things like storage for storing out blob and table information, or even using SQL Azure, and even things like the access control service to allow single sign-on for those applications across identity providers. Another key application scenario that we've really focused on, based on a lot of feedback from our customers, is around gaming. And so if you think about gaming as well, games often have the usage characteristics where they benefit from a cloud-based environment, where they need to be able to go and be accessed from a variety of different client experiences, especially as you start looking at the social gaming space, as well as the need to go in and scale up based on user demand, or scale down as a game may not be popular over a long course of time. And so that's another case where we have a toolkit that's available as a resource you can start to take a look at how you'd use Windows Azure in this specific scenario. And then finally, what we've announced today as well is a toolkit for Windows 8 applications that are connected out to Windows Azure. This toolkit is out there on Codeplex right now, and what it does is it provides some of the starting code that you can use for, in particular, using notifications on Windows 8 and driving those notifications, managing all those notifications with Windows Azure. So toolkit is out on Codeplex right now, as well as several of the other toolkits are on Codeplex and GitHub, and you can download all of these on the web right now. There are also a number of sessions that will drill in on these specific application scenarios. And the sessions are really more designed to talk about what are some of the characteristics of these scenarios, the key things that you need to consider, and showing you how you can take advantage of some of these toolkits. And I've included some of the session codes down below if you want to check those out. There are a lot of additional sessions on the Windows Azure platform at Build. This is really designed to give you kind of a tour of some of the new features and capabilities that are introduced in the platform. There are a lot of sessions that will go much, much deeper on these areas. A couple sessions occurring during this time slot, including one from Brad Calder on Windows Azure Storage, where he's going deep into storage analytics and as well as Giro replication. Tomorrow there's a Getting Started session, so if you are just getting started with the platform, I encourage you to attend this session by Brian Prince, where he'll actually just walk through building an application, an end-to-end app, with those core services of Windows Azure Compute, storage, as well as a database. And then as well, tomorrow there will be a session that's dedicated on the new service bus messaging capability. And so if you're interested in that service, I encourage you to go take a look at that session where that'll go deeper as well. And then on Friday, there are a number of sessions that we've included that are on the kind of the scale side, building highly scalable web applications and really taking advantage of the platform for reach, as well as some sessions around Windows 8. So if you're thinking about building Windows 8 apps, you have a need for storage or authentication or other capabilities, I encourage you to check out those sessions as well. There's a complete list of the sessions out on windowsazure.com/build, so don't feel like you have to write all these things down. Just go out there and you can find the complete list. In terms of some other resources, as of today, the Windows Azure SDK 1.5 and tools are available in WebPI. So I literally took the screenshot this morning. Just go run the web platform installer and you can download all of those. If you're not familiar with WebPI, it's basically a tool that allows you to go quickly get some of the new tools from Microsoft, as well as SDKs and other applications. You can also just go out to windowsazure.com and find the links directly there. We've also introduced ASP.MVC4 preview that's available today, which, as you saw from the first demo, you can really combine those together and create some pretty interesting and compelling applications. And then finally, one of the other resources I'll point out is the Windows Azure Platform Training Kit, where we're focusing on providing some hands-on labs and tutorials around how you use things like storage analytics, like service bus messaging. And so if you have a chance to go attend the hands-on labs here at Build, that's great. If you don't, you can also download all of those hands-on labs through this kit, and you'll be able to go through and learn some of those new features and new services as well. So with that, I know we're a little over time, but I'm happy to hang around and answer some of the questions that you guys might have. So I appreciate your time today, and have a wonderful Build.